This video isn't for those with more than $2 million, but if you have under that, here's one of the strongest retirement tax strategies step by step for you. By the end of this video, you'll understand how to withdraw from your accounts in the most tax efficient order, what portion of your pre-tax money that you should convert to Roth and over how many years, and finally, how to best prepare for possible higher taxes when a spouse dies or when your heirs inherit the money. In 2 full years of making educational retirement videos, the single most frequent question that I get is about taxes. And because I haven't found a video compiling it all together for families with under $2 million, you're going to see that today. Once you carefully walk through these exercises step by step, you start to see your whole retirement tax picture working together clearly. Because although some of these strategies used to help families with 2 to 5 times the amount of money you're dealing with here can help, the reality is you are dealing with a completely different scenario with completely different solutions than the ultra high net worth individuals that financial media seems to assume everyone is. Those high net worth have a tax bomb to mitigate. You may have just a relatively minor problem to navigate. And perhaps you're thinking, is this really any more complicated than just converting money to Roth when I can? And frankly, sometimes it's not. But what many retirees miss is that tax strategy under a certain asset level is really just a matter of following a simple, straightforward system that Roth conversions are a part of, but they're not the whole thing. It's this oversimplified version of the conversation that says, just do Roth conversions. That is very often a good thing, but if you do those out of order at the wrong size, without accounting for healthcare costs, without factoring in future bracket room and potential donating, it's not just unhelpful. It can actively work against the exact goal of mitigating costs by raising them over the course of your life, sometimes even by hundreds of thousands of dollars. What families who get this right understand, and what almost no one lays out clearly, is that once your income strategy is sorted with claiming Social Security or pensions, roughly when to retire, etc., the game of tax strategy then opens up, and it's one of inches below $2 million. You aren't going to be able to make one tweak and save $200,000 a year like the ultra high net worth. But when you compound together the sequence of what you do and when you do it 5, 6, 7 times, your tax picture completely changes. Let's get into it. First, you are going to split your pre-tax money that is subject to required minimum distributions into 2 different categories. The first of those is what you absolutely are not going to convert to Roth, and the second of those is what you will consider converting to Roth in a future step. And maybe you're thinking, hold on, I'm open to not converting some of the money, but why are you assuming right away that not all of it will be converted? And technically, all of it still could be. Here's why. The amount that won't be converted is going to be comprised of money that you could withdraw in lower brackets later on, or money that could take advantage of qualified charitable distributions. If you will not have either of those, you may still convert all of it. To determine that, let's start with the future low bracket room. This is generally a matter of saying after all of the income you will be receiving, no matter what later in retirement, not yet including RMDs though, how much room will you have in those brackets that are a certain amount lower than the bracket you are in now or will be before that period. For example, if you are single and have a fully taxable pension that adjusts for inflation at $1,500 a month, on top of a $2,000 a month Social Security benefit, under current tax law, at age 75, you would have to pay taxes on $2,500 from Social Security plus the pension. That means after the $24,150 deduction, which is the standard deduction plus senior deductions plus the One Big Beautiful Bill Act deduction, you have another $3,650 in the 0% bracket that can be pulled out, and another $50,400 that can be pulled out in the 10 or 12% bracket. If you are currently in the 22 or 24% bracket, and this will later be the case for you, you almost certainly wouldn't want to convert everything and not be able to take advantage of this. So while determining the full number of what not to convert for this step can be tricky, it's absolutely worth selecting a certain time period, say ages 75 to 85, where you will attempt to take advantage of this strategy, sum that money up, and add it to the do not convert bucket. It's worth noting that the One Big Beautiful Bill Act deduction is currently temporary and could be removed. On top of that, Social Security taxation could be changed, and if you're married, remember some risks here are associated with one spouse passing early and deductions and brackets being adjusted for the worst. The second step to determining the total number to put in that do not convert bucket is what amount of money you will be donating each year after you reach age 70 and a half. The reason for this is that once you hit that age, you can now use what are called qualified charitable distributions to donate money from your IRA completely tax-free to a qualified charity. It's tax-free to you, it's tax-free to them, and it satisfies your required minimum distributions if you have them. And it also doesn't increase your modified adjusted gross income, which could raise healthcare costs if that wasn't the case. According to GitNux's research, the average retiree over 65 gave 12% of their income. However, it's actually only a very small percentage that take advantage of QCDs. There's a reason that Michael Kitces, one of the most well-cited names in retirement planning, has called them one of the most underutilized strategies in retirement. For this number, just like the previous one, it's worth selecting a time period, say 70.5 to 80.5, where you plan to take advantage of that strategy. Sum that total up, add it to your do not convert bucket, and you're done with step one. The money left over is the money that you might convert. Those are the two buckets. The reason most people skip this step is because they get conversion happy, and it's hard to blame people for that. But take this slow. Split your pre-tax money subject to RMDs into these two groups and move forward. The second step is to optimize the order in which you withdraw from your accounts in retirement. First, I'll explain the traditional method of doing so, and finally we'll add in a few caveats. The method, which is outlined here clearly in CPA Mike Piper's book, Can I Retire? Chapter 11, is this. Number one is going to be to spend from your checking and taxable accounts without unrealized gains first. The second is going to be spending money from taxable accounts with unrealized gains, given three conditions. Those are number one, that the gains are long-term. Number two is that the gains are small relative to the market value of the asset. And number three is that you wouldn't plan to donate this money in the near future otherwise. After that, you withdraw thirdly from your tax-deferred buckets and fourthly from your tax-free or Roth accounts. Now, some caveats to consider with this. First, you may consider swapping steps 3 and 4, which is your tax-deferred and tax-free withdrawals, if it makes sense to do that. If you are currently in a much higher tax bracket than you will be later, well, it might actually make sense to withdraw from the tax-free and wait to withdraw from the tax-deferred until you're in that lower bracket. This can happen, for example, if a spouse is still working while one is retired. You also may consider blended withdrawals, which means multiple withdrawals from different accounts in the same tax year to mitigate healthcare risks. That alone could be tens of thousands of dollars a year before Medicare, and after Medicare, it's not quite as big of an impact, but you still could trigger additional charges that simply could have been avoided just by doing blended withdrawals. And ultimately, the best thing you can do here to determine what the best withdrawal strategy is for you is to run this through retirement software, and you can stress test all of the different orders of spending from those different accounts and find out which one is going to save you the most on taxes, number one, and give you the highest end-of-life tax-adjusted assets. And if you're finding this useful, subscribe to the channel. You have my word, you will not regret it. The third step, after the withdrawal sequence is completed, and you want to be careful with this one, I'll explain why, is to, with the amount of pre-tax money that is set aside to possibly convert to Roth, slowly begin doing that up to a pre-selected tax bracket or healthcare threshold. And perhaps you're thinking, well, I'd rather just convert up to the 24% bracket or higher and get this over and done with up front. And that may actually be the best course of action. What I'd encourage you to do, however, is to test that theory. Here's how you do that. First, you have to identify your goal with these Roth conversions, as silly as that may sound. Of course, I'm sure you want to pay less tax and have more money. But are you wanting to optimize for that just in the next 10 years? For your life? For you and your spouse's lives? For your kids' lives? Because although you may want to say all of those, it's often the case that that can't be the answer. If your heirs, for example, were to receive this money in their highest earning working years, they may incur a much higher tax rate than you ever will again. If that's the case, you may convert even more money now than you otherwise would have had you just considered you and your spouse's lives. Second, once you've identified that goal, you can then look for what threshold to convert up to, whether that be a tax bracket or healthcare limit. At the end of the day, if it's cheaper today, not only than a specific future date, like 10 years from now, but all future dates, it likely makes sense to go for the conversion. Realize, however, that this has some nuance, including where you will pay the conversion tax from, if future tax law may change, if one spouse passes early and brackets/deductions drop quickly, the impact of healthcare costs, and more. Here's an example of a couple we work with a pretty straightforward scenario. They're in the 24% bracket now. Most of their retirements will be in the 22% bracket before any sort of conversions, and then a relatively obvious area to likely do some conversions here where their federal income tax rate is down to 12%. If we go over to the tax strategies tab, we've already run some numbers here, but you can see first the withdrawal sequence tab here. We have them doing the traditional method of taxable, tax deferred, tax free. You could test that against other ones if you like to. And then we have a Roth conversion happening up to the 22% tax bracket. You can adjust that to 24, 32, lower. We ultimately ended up going with the 22% bracket, and you could also test that against Medicare premium thresholds, as we mentioned a couple times before. You could do up to a certain amount, different tiers of additional surcharges to see if it would be beneficial to do so. We ultimately ended on the ordinary income tax bracket of up to 22%. And when we did that, they had a little less than $200,000 saved in taxes paid throughout their life, and their tax-adjusted ending assets a little over $400,000 higher. And it can't be emphasized enough that, especially for you with less than $2 million, to remember that retirement tax strategy here is totally a game of inches. A few small missteps and a great strategy turns into just an okay one, so don't rush this. Fourth and finally, and this is referred to by tax advisor and America's IRA expert Ed Slott in his book as the single best, most cost-effective yet amazingly underutilized strategy for protecting retirement account balances, especially large ones, from being decimated by the highest levels of combined taxation, and that is, depending on the size of your projected future IRA balance, if you aren't able to entirely convert it all, to look to mitigate tax hikes for the surviving spouse and your heirs through using permanent life insurance. And you might be thinking, well, I've heard Dave Ramsey and other similar figures say to avoid permanent life insurance. And the vast majority of the time here, they actually are correct. Part of the problem with these policies is that there are different companies with different products that can be structured in different ways, and so on. When that's the case, it's unfortunately not uncommon that someone thinking they are buying one thing with certain benefits ends up completely getting something else. When a policy is structured properly to achieve the desired result, well, that's a different story. The idea here is to purchase a set amount of life insurance that will pay out to your beneficiary income tax-free that they can use to pay additional taxes with so that their IRA balance doesn't get eaten away at. It is important to remember, however, that because this is insurance, the sooner that one passes away, the more worth it was to buy it. If you purchase a policy with a death benefit that equals about half the balance of your IRA, as Ed Slott tends to recommend, and you pass away in 5 years, well, that's going to be a significantly higher gain than if you passed away in 40. The reason that this can be very attractive to retirees is that they don't love the idea of, number one, if I pass away, my IRA for my spouse is especially going to take a larger hit since all of their deductions and brackets will drop significantly. Or number two, if both me and my spouse pass away, our IRAs will also take a big hit because my kids will have to withdraw the money within 10 years under the Secure Act and Secure Act 2.0 in their highest earning years, pushing the bracket up even higher. To avoid those scenarios, they could purchase life insurance, with the trade-off that if they do live much longer than expected, they likely could have just had more money just leaving it invested somewhere, but of course, that isn't guaranteed either. If this is a route you want to consider, I can't emphasize it enough. You really need to be careful about who you work with and what you are buying. The reality is, the turnover rate for people who enter the life insurance industry within 3 years is 92% for a reason. It's a very unfortunate situation, but all it takes is getting your policy set up incorrectly by a well-meaning agent who was improperly trained, and they're now getting paid 3 to 5 times more than if they set things up correctly while you purchased something that simply isn't what you were wanting. That same couple from earlier, although we didn't go into detail on the software, in fact, used a very similar strategy to not only protect one spouse from higher taxes, but also as a way to elect to take their annuity with a higher single payout instead of a lower joint one. This way, if the person taking the single income passes away first, the survivor will have a large enough death benefit that they can replicate that income either by purchasing another immediate annuity of her own or by using another withdrawal strategy. Here's the thing. You've heard in the media that the biggest problem you'll have in retirement is going to be taxes. And because of that, you may feel the tendency to overcorrect to avoid a future tax bomb. But the reality is, for you, taxes are just another part of your retirement to navigate through. When that is done carefully, using a system to stack little wins on top of each other, that's where the real gains are made. Look at it this way. Your IRA is not a liability. It's money you've grown and haven't had to pay taxes on for decades. That is a good thing. Now it's just up to you to carefully withdraw that money so you don't trigger additional unnecessary tax. And listen, you can just stick to heavy Roth conversions. You'll get them over and done with, and you won't have to worry about taxes anymore. Or you can take things one step at a time to learn what strategies are available to you and select the best one. If you want to do the second one, I put together a free 6-page cheat sheet called the 4 Main Tax Strategies for a sub-$2 million retirement. It walks through the strategy we covered today and more with trade-offs and examples for each one. It's the first link in the description. It's free. Check it out below. Now that you have an overview of what a strong tax strategy looks like for families with under $2 million, there's something most people wanting to retire in the next 3 to 5 years never really think about until it's too late. And it has nothing to do with your tax strategy or how much money you have. It has everything to do with the non-financial side of retirement. In the video on screen now, I walk through the single most important thing to prepare for in the years before retirement and why everything changes for the few families who get this right. Watch it now, you won't regret it. I'll see you there.